All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Survivor Indianapolis, Advantage Island, episode 10 recap. We're getting down to it. On election night, we're recording and posting because it's been a crazy couple weeks for both of us. And just like in the election, we're talking about votes being cast, but it's kind of the opposite. We don't really want the votes, like Sonya experienced in this episode. So let's go ahead and dive into it, Alex. We've got the one of the more physical challenges. I laugh at myself when on the video I say this is like the last physical challenge, and it's like just some running. Like, it isn't really that much, especially after I went and played for myself a few months ago. Those challenges, the first three or four especially, I was like, this is way more physical than anything I ever did. And it's funny because Chris was like, oh, it was easy, and everyone else was like, yeah, we just kind of like knew we couldn't beat Chris. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on this challenge here?
Hey, I mean, yeah, it was physical, but at the end, there was a puzzle, a word puzzle. So even if
Yeah,
you are a little bit slower, it wasn't like you had to go through like 4 or 5 times. You're only going through the rope course twice.
yeah,
And poor Moretta, I mean, I just felt absolutely horrible for her
for
because she
sure.
took a big spill. And I think partially that maybe the spill from her caused the other players to be a little bit more cautious with their running. And they're like, you know what? Even if Chris is gonna beat us, like I'm not gonna even try. Like Sonya was right there behind him a little bit, like she was, easily in second. But
Yeah.
I mean, I was getting tired watching them. I'm not gonna lie, like they looked exhausted. Like Adrian, when she came back the second time to go through the rope course, the look she made was just like, I am wiped out. And I think it's just like part of like just like the challenge of doing this all in one day. Like
Yeah.
it's not like this challenge specifically is hard, but all the stuff you've been doing all day, the ups and downs of everything, even emotionally and mentally, maybe with all the strategy you're
hmm
doing, like it's just a lot on you. So, but Chris absolutely just crushed this chorus, but you can't spell that didn't help him.
So before we get to the end of that challenge, I will speak to I think it also the like slowdown, right? Where people were like they went through the first one pretty like full force and then they kind of like started to seem gassed or maybe they weren't even 100% giving 100% effort. I think that speaks also beyond what you said. It also speaks to the more casual nature of our contestants. Like a lot of them are competitive and they want to win and they enjoy the like this cast was I would say the most locked into the day that I've ever had.
Mm.
And not that like if you gave them a score 1 to 100, how locked in are you? I just feel like top to bottom, they were the most locked in. No one left, right? Everyone wanted to be a part of the jury. It didn't matter if you were the first person voted off or not. Like Bailey was first, or Bailey was second voted off and was second place in the returning player challenge. Like almost got back in, like all that stuff. So I'm not saying that they don't care. I'm just saying uh, they don't exactly know what they're getting into, and so it isn't like people were like training and trying to get in shape. They're just like, yeah, I'm gonna show up and like do whatever I can do. And if I haven't been working out very much, and if I'm not really in good shape, it's gonna show if I have to run. And so it showed a little bit, especially because it was again, this is round 10. This is like 8 or 9 hours into the day. I don't remember exactly, but it's pretty far into the day, getting close to the end, and so that definitely shows. And in regards to Moretta's fall, I do take some blame for that. Not because I made the challenge and the challenge was too hard for her or for anybody, and that's why she fell. I mean, I think she would say, "No, I just messed up," but I do think there's something to the fact that we used that paracord, which is like thinner than my pinky, for the rope instead of like something thicker that you could see really well,
Hmm.
because then you're distracted by like having to look down and see it. And if you don't look very well, you can't really see it very well in your peripheral vision because it's pretty thin. And it wasn't like the brightest day part of the day. It was a few hours past, and it wasn't obviously it was still light out outside, but it wasn't like it was like noon or 2. It was like closer to 5 or 6 probably in the evening. So not the brightest part of the day either. So the visibility of that cord, I think, affects your ability to make sure that you're jumping high enough to clear it. It really wasn't that high, but it was high enough that if you consider the fact that you couldn't see it super well, maybe then I think that could have contributed to her fall. But
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say it's really hard to see in the video too, like where they are
oh, you can't see it
exactly.
at all in the video.
Yeah, you're just kind of guessing, and so you're like, oh, okay. And I helped you set that up. We all kind of were setting it up that day before the challenge or before the day of Survivor. And I think we should tell everybody a little bit of a fun backstory here because
Sure.
we were using scissors to cut the pieces off of the rope and then tie them to the
Mhm.
tree. And all
Yeah,
of a sudden, David goes, "Where are the scissors at?" And so all of us go on like a mad hunt, looking
yeah,
everywhere in that vicinity, probably for like 20 minutes looking for scissors. And all of a sudden, David touches his back pocket and goes, "Oh, sorry, they're right here, guys." So, I think this challenge was just cursed at the beginning of the setup of it. But regardless, I do agree with you. Like maybe if it were a little bit like of a brighter color, or if you put like a light on it or something, or like a ribbon on it that was hanging down, you could see it
yeah,
better.
sure.
But I will say this, we saw a lot of people kind of like walking up to it and kind of like lifting it up and ducking underneath. I think if we do this challenge again, we say if you touch any part of the rope, you have to restart.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that's it's too easy because the thing is like, I mean, when I say touch it, I would say with your hands. I think if you like are trying to just like walk over it and your like leg or something touches it, whatever.
Yeah.
You can't be. I would say you can't step on it to bring it down, and you couldn't use your hands. I didn't think about that really because I don't know. I tested it out. It was one of the last things. I think it may have been the last thing when we tested out. If you look at the footage of me jumping over uh the wires, the
Yeah.
paracord, while you're giving us the challenge description, you can see that like it's not dark, but it's like out of all the footage you've seen so far through these 10 episodes, it is the only thing that's like shadowy at all.
Hmm.
Even the other footage of me or you doing the challenges and some videos of Annie doing challenges for the challenge description voiceovers that you do every episode. All those are pretty bright and sunny. This is the one exception where it's like, oh, it's pretty dark. It's because we spent a long time setting it up, and then we spent a long time looking for those scissors that were, nowhere to be found. Who could have known that they were? And it's just, who could have known?
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so
you even said they weren't in your pocket, which made it even great.
yeah, I checked. I don't know what happened. I don't know. So I was distracted by how off task and distracting Brooke and Stacy were. So it's not my fault. No,
Love
it
it.
definitely is my fault, but whatever. So then we get to the word scramble, and I wanted it deliberately. I honestly think I probably should have made the rope course part harder
Hmm.
in some way or longer, maybe. I don't know. Um, because I wanted the puzzle part just to be like a little tag at the end of it and not have me like 50-50. And so it felt like the overall challenge was pretty quick actually. And I know that like again, we're working with volunteers. But we saw like this is the trouble what happened with Chris in a mutiny or however you spelled immunity
Yeah.
first time. This is part of what happens when you have the people that aren't in the game that aren't myself talking during the challenges and talking and giving like stuff feedback to the players because it quickly devolves into chaos because once one person starts talking, now you have multiple people that are talking. And I'm pretty sure you can hear three different people saying, "Oh, they've got it. Oh, they've got it," in the video, and then like people were ending their videos when they thought someone was done, but not when it was like actually just like finished. So then we didn't have all the footage because like Ben, so, and again, like Ben knows I'm not mad about this at all, but Ben is telling Chris to call me over, which he shouldn't do. Just like, not upset about it, but he just shouldn't do that. You just shouldn't like let the player let me know. And that's their job. That's like literally we saw in Survivor a couple seasons ago, where a player, it might have been Caleb actually from 44 5. Caleb
Yeah. 45.
there's maybe I'm mashing some stuff up, but there was a season at some point where a player finished a puzzle. They have it on video. He finished it, and he didn't say anything. And then somebody else finished it, and Jeff called it for them. And he was like, "Well, you have to tell me. Like, you can't just stand there and think I'm going to see it." So, like, that's a part of the game. And so then what happens is kind of like snowballs in terms of like the chaos of it. So because Ben says to Chris to call me over, I hear Ben say that then I think, well, Chris must have it because why else would Ben say that if Chris was wrong? And maybe Ben misread it and thought it was right and then realized it was wrong.
Hmm.
But because Ben is almost immediately like, no, 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 he's not right. And I'm like, well, why'd you have me come over here then? If you knew
I
so quickly, and it may have just been a quick split second like reaction and realization. I don't really know. But it then leads to more chaos because then Chris flips his board over and loses all of his pieces. And that would not have happened if Ben hadn't said anything. And then we have John saying, like, oh, Adrian's got it. And you just hear this chaos of people saying Leah had almost gotten it and she hadn't put it on the paper, hadn't followed the directions for the challenge. And it was just like absolute anarchy. And luckily, I do think we got it right. I think that, like, Chris would have called me over. And I would have looked at it more carefully if Ben had not have called. Like I heard Ben, so I thought, oh, it must be right again. So I would have gone over there, seen it's not spelled right, and said, no, you're not right. And then he would have fixed it very quickly, and it would have been over, and it would have been like pretty drama free. And so it ended up being the right outcome, I think, or what would have happened if there was no interference like that. But it just ends up becoming like a tricky situation where you don't know the impact that you're having by saying anything to people in the game. And it's why I'm such a big stickler about anyone that helps me, like almost just like gag order. Like don't say don't say anything. And even though I'm probably at times a little bit too like on it with that and too worried about that, but it's because sometimes it can lead to chaos or even lead to like a change of an outcome, which I don't ever want to have happen. So,
No,
but
and I and I
what do you think?
no, I do get that, and I was gonna say this, like when I was watching it, I was kind of stressed out by how everybody was scattered instead of everybody staying at the table, and I think that's where things could have been easier because even when you're like, okay, Chris takes his stuff, goes and onto the side, and I couldn't tell that it was actually Ben saying, tell him to come over. I thought Chris told Ben to say that. So I'm glad you clarified that. But I was actually watching Chris do it, and I was like, oh, he spelled this wrong. So David's going to come over and see it's wrong. He's going to have to fix the spelling. But on normal Survivor, when they do a puzzle like that, usually one person will raise their hand, say, Jeff, I got it. And
Hmm.
everybody else has to stop. I noticed that
Yeah,
when you were checking people's puzzles, people were still working. Like even Cameron, who was so far behind, was like still like taking letters out of the bag. And it's like, I think at that point, you make everybody stop. You
yeah,
check that one person to say, no, Chris got it wrong. Do it again.
yeah,
Whatever. That's not right. And then that's when you kind of figure things out. And there's no penalty for getting it wrong. You just got to figure out what you did wrong and raise your hand up again. So that way there would have been
yeah,
a little bit more clarity on like, okay, now we know David's checking Chris's league. You can't continue to keep working on yours. Adrian, you're off to the side. Nobody even knows what you're doing except for John. Like if everybody's at the table, make their hands come up off the table. They can't work on the puzzle. I think that would have created a little bit more of a easier way to kind of judge it. Whereas
yeah,
with everybody scattered around and, Leah, I feel bad for her because she didn't flip her paper over, and I don't even know if she didn't realize it or what, but like she just started like filling it out on the other
yeah.
side of the construction paper. You're like, nope, you got to flip it over. She's like, and I like that she didn't get mad about it. She's like, crap, okay, so she
Well,
just
I'm pretty
did
sure
it.
that that had been a part of the directions.
Okay,
If it hadn't been that round, it definitely had in the returning player challenge.
but she wasn't in
Just a
that,
couple.
right?
Yeah, but she was the same there watching.
True.
So like, and I think because she was like, oh yeah, I didn't turn it over. Like it wasn't like
Yeah,
it wasn't like
she
she's
didn't
like,
get
oh
mad.
no, yeah, but she like but the way that she says like her response made me feel like she realizes that like this was a part of the game and she just
True.
didn't do it right. So
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what triggered her to be like, yeah, he's right. I didn't do the right thing. But whether it was because I said it in the challenge directions earlier or if it's because she remembered it from the returning player challenge. But either way, she handled it really well, obviously. So
Yeah. I mean, you were kind of giving me a look when I was saying that I didn't like the players scattered like that. Did you?
I don't like the players. I want the players to be a little bit more scattered, even more than they were on this challenge.
So you don't want them
So
all at the table?
N not for something like this because of how simple the puzzle is, and because of the fact that like okay, let's just say this scenario plays out where they're all at the table. Maybe there's like on each side of the table, so there's like three on each side or whatever many it is. Is it six here or seven?
Six, final six.
Six. So it'd be three on each side, right, of this rectangular table. Then Chris gets fills it out. His is wrong. He says, "Oh, I think I'm right. Whatever. I see that it's wrong." Everyone stops. They can then look at Chris's puzzle, and if Chris does throw it away or something like that, then they have gotten enough information to probably get the answer from Chris's puzzle, and then like, and sure you can say, "Well, Chris shouldn't like throw it away or whatever." It's just like you're going to lead to people cheating off each other's papers, and that may not work out for them, but it might. I think what it's just like one of those things where you have to do it with a purpose. And I think there are times where you could do it with a purpose, and times where I think you just shouldn't do it. What I realized while you were talking, what we should have done, absolute no brainer to me, is if we had them start at the driveway between the garages and run over to the tree line and run back, right? Well,
Hmm.
the next challenge, I won't spoil what the challenge is next week, but the challenge is in the barn with a bunch of tables set up. And I don't know why you should have just started in the barn with
Yeah.
all those tables. Everyone has their own table
Yeah.
or whatever, and then you run out of the barn. You're running like 20 more yards, like I don't know, not that much. Like So it shouldn't change the overall complexity or physicality of the challenge, and we would then have both challenges basically set up more or less at the same time. We
No,
just didn't see that.
yeah, and that's why I was gonna say like, where are we gonna get the tables at, set them up? Obviously, we had them set up in the barn already, but like, if we would have just had those set up on the driveway too, right? We could have just done that
Yeah,
and then just
either
picked the
one
tables up and took them into the
took them
barn
over.
for
Yeah,
that. I mean, they're just give everybody a station at least, so they're that's kind of what I was thinking, just so everybody's like uniform in the same spot. It's not just some are working on the table, some are working on the ground. Like
yeah,
it was just a little bit too chaotic for me, and I was like,
yeah.
but you're right. I don't think any of the team that's helping, and it's hard not to do it because you're kind of like
I know.
you're rooting for each player when you're like around them to do well, whatever. But like, hey, when they got it, it's on them to let you know. And
Mhm.
whoever you hear first, you got to go with that judgment. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's Adrian might have been loud. She might have been done again before Chris. She might have been done first before Chris got done again. But if she's not loud enough, it didn't
yeah.
seem like she had got done based on the video footage. But
I
I'm
don't
just
think
saying that's
and
on
what
her
I
though.
yeah, and what I experienced in the real time because Ben was watching both because Ben had a better actually vantage point than me, and I thought Chris finished it first, and Ben then confirmed my first reaction because Ben was I was in between the two of them looking back and forth, and Ben was behind Chris, so he could look right in front of him and see Chris, and then see past Chris and see Adrian as well.
Yeah.
So he could see both of them in his line of sight, and I was looking back and forth, which I wasn't in a great position, partially because of the chaos of what had happened, and also the chaos, like you were saying, of some of them being here, some of them being over there, and part of that is because I wanted to give our first like point of the challenge was to have them all at the table, like what you said. I just decided to give them some agency and allow them to, if they wanted to move their puzzle station, to waste some time, technically, because you'd be losing time to take your paper and walk away. So I was like, well, if you want to waste time and move away for privacy's sake, then that's fine. But then that leads to people being spread out all over the place, and it's kind of hard to see everyone's puzzles. Whereas if we set up the stations, we can see everything better. So
Mm.
that's definitely something we should have done better. But I think the outcome was unchanged by all of the chaos.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, I don't think it would have changed much of anything. It just
Yeah.
you always can go back and criticize and critique little things that could have done
Yeah.
better, but like it was
Sure.
fine. And I will say this: out of all the rope courses we've done, this was the easiest one of all of them.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe the one that Erica, when she won the season, Erica won last year, I believe that wasn't as difficult as how we had did it in my season.
Yours
We
was the
were in.
hardest by a long shot.
Oh man, I mean that was crazy, and I
I
think
kind
we
of want to do
like
that again, though.
it was really good, but it was in the harder. It was like at the thicker part of the woods, so definitely more of a challenge, right? I think that'd be good, maybe for like a season 10 coming up in the future, something like that, just make it a little bit more challenging. But regardless, I'm just saying like this was probably one of the easier ones, and like there was no requirements to be like clipped in with a carabiner, right? So
Hmm.
a little bit more of a simple thing, and we had their bags matched up with the colors, so they had to grab it. Like that might have been the only thing, is make sure you get the right color to match up, so you know which puzzle pieces to get. But overall, I thought that Chris dominated that challenge
Yeah.
and almost lost it on the puzzle. But if we want to get into the strategy side of things now,
Yeah. Let's do it.
let me just put it out here this way. This was the Chris show. I mean, if you
Yes.
don't think Chris is the front runner right now to win this entire game
Yeah.
based on how this last episode just went, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that was everything he was telling people. They voted how he talked to them.
Yes. Literally. And he on top of him being doing all of that, also being just great TV, like being the only, he is, I think, the only person who is consistently thinking about the camera. I think
Yes.
that everyone else occasionally is, but he is like 80% of the time thinking about the camera. And it helps so much. Thank you, Chris. But it is literally like what I do think is funny is I think it also kind of shows the rush of the day and the beginner level strategy that we do have. And that's not a knock at these people. Like it is what it is. The vast majority of them haven't seen Survivor or have seen a couple seasons, maybe. Like I think Cameron had watched a couple of seasons, one or two seasons before he played. Um, and so their strategy just isn't as like there's certain things that we're gonna think of. I'm gonna talk about here in a minute that they just aren't seeing.
Mm,
It's that way in any game, any competition. The more experience you have, the more likely you are to see things that are more complicated and more expert level strategies. So Uh, a good example is like you said, everyone that Chris talked to, they voted the way that he wanted them to vote. Um, but that is obviously not going to work out for several people because we're at six and the final three is all we can get to. So we have two last couple of weeks we've had like this alliance. It's kind of like an onion, right? You have the big alliance of Shibwe and then the small alliance of Best Class.
Mm.
And Chris in particular is kind of able to float between both of those. Moretta also is in both of those, right? Whereas Leah and Adrian are just in the Best Class alliance, and then Sonya and Cameron are only in the Shibwe alliance. So you have these two people in the middle of this like alliance that has led to this point of six people. Because last week we had Annie go home, and that was the last person that was really in either one. She was not
Mm.
Sheboy. She was not really in best. She tried to get in best class, but as Chris said in the episode, she's trying to hop on a train that she wasn't already on. So that is that is again him thinking about the TV aspect of it. But this is down to it now, where there has to be a choice made, and the choice ends up being made. Let's go with best class over Shibwe, and they vote Sonya out. Do you think? I'm not sure how I feel. Do you think this was the best decision? Who was this like good for? Who was it bad for? I guess is the way that you should word that question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I were Chris, I don't know if I'd want to get rid of Sonya because I feel like at this point that might be his like not his closest ally, but you know that she's definitely going to follow suit with him.
Hmm.
I think that Leah probably would have been the right target here at this point, but that's also his wife, and I know they
Hmm.
were working together, so for him it's kind of interesting. I'm kind of confused why Cameron voted for Adrian versus talking with Sonya and voting out Leah. That
So
didn't
that's what
make
that's what I was referring to
yeah
when I
that
said
that was just
that they're
kind of
not seeing
like
next level things.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, right, you know, Adrian goes, yeah, Chris said he's going to tell people to vote for me. I'm kind of the decoy vote. And she's just like, okay with it. And like,
Hmm.
Chris is like, like telling her, like, up front, like, this is what we're doing. But then Sonya's like, so you want to vote for Leah? Chris is like, I'm glad to vote for Leah. Just
Gladly.
like gladly vote for Leah and like played it up. So, like, here's Sonya, like, just, he's got her basically eating out of his hand, like like you're gonna vote for who I want you to vote for. Like he's got all this power. Like why not take these two with you to the final and upset the fruit basket a little bit here with your best class alliance? Because if you're looking at the game, I think that I would have voted out Lee or Adrian here if I were Chris. I think Moretta is so easily persuaded based on how she just doesn't want to be the target. So I think she would follow suit with whatever. So I think Chris probably would have had a better chance here, in my opinion, to kind of be like the front runner had he broke away from that best class because now you got your Sheboy strong and you've been kind of running that group. And challenge wise, who's the biggest threat to you in this group? I mean, I I'm trying to think in
Sonya.
Sonya, so that
I think
maybe
Sonya
be
is the biggest threat, which I think it's why she went home.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think that makes the most sense,
And that's the only real case I think that Chris would have. Other people, and I think the same thing for like Cameron, who he didn't vote for Sonya, but it is complicated because you have multiple different people who everyone has their own agenda,
Yeah.
right? Everyone wants their own thing, and I think if you're Chris, from his point of view specifically, I guess we probably don't have time to go through everyone's point of view in detail, but for Chris specifically, you have power here, you have the immunity, so you have some control. They can't really do much against you, but because you're at six and because you're at this situation where, like I said, it's kind of 2-2-2 with the middle two of Merida and Chris being able to go to both of the other two sides and make a group of four. The problem is if you are Chris, if you want to vote off Adrian or Leah, you need Merida or you need them to be willing to go to rocks. In which
Mm.
case, if they do go to rocks, you're safe because you have immunity. Which is so, but then like either Cameron or Sonya, one of the two of them, would be drawing rocks against Adrian and Moretta, and you could risk losing Moretta, who you were
Yeah.
close to, and who's doing whatever you want. So, and again, like going to rocks is something that like basically no one considered. After the second or third tribal council, when Chris and Mason were like toying the idea of just like going in and tying it and seeing what happens, I think they thought it would be like a coin flip kind of thing, or like a just like a random. Maybe the two of them would have a challenge and one of them would go home, so it kind of keeps both sides clean of like
Mm.
bloodshed. But I was like, no, it's a rock draw, and then everyone else gets to draw rocks. And then from that moment on, they were like, yeah, no more rock draw. But there is a potential like benefit to going to rocks at times. It worked for Tyson, right? So like there are times where and is the right thing to do.
Mm.
Uh, but they're not seeing that. And again, like in this situation, I'm not sure that is the right thing to do because you might lose Moretta. It's a 1 in 3 that you get. It's a steady pile of votes on Adrian, then it's a 1 in 3 that you hit Leah, who's also your wife. So you're not like you're super eager to get her out. I think if you're Chris, you know you can beat anybody at final three. It's just a matter of being able to get to final three. And the easiest way so far for him has just been to win the challenges. And
Mm.
Sonya is the only real person that's showed to be been shown has shown to be a threat in that way. Moretta won a challenge, but it was the axe throwing, and it was just against other women. And Sonya has won maybe only one other challenge, but it was a little bit more. No, no, no. She won. Did she win sumo? No, Moretta won sumo, right?
No, I think Sonya won sumo. I
Okay.
think Moretta only
Moretta
won
only won axe throwing.
the axe throwing.
So
Correct.
Sonya won sumo and won the tile flip. And both of those were just against women, but they were much more like physically demanding and much more like show your competitive spirit. Like the person that has the most competitive drive and gives the most to the challenge, like just tries hard, probably will win. And that paid out, that like shown out for Sonya. And so like they're seeing that competitive aggression. Not that it's like anything like over the top, obviously, but like most of the women were like they'd try, and then it was like, okay, whatever. Whereas Sonya's like going out, right? She's like
Yeah.
really trying. And I think that like you could just make an argument like maybe Chris saw that and was like, well, if anyone's gonna beat me, it's probably her. And Leah and Adrian already want to get her out. So it's like that's the easy vote. It's like getting rid of a potential competitor. I have to win 2 more challenges, and I'm in the final three.
Yeah.
Which again, winning that many challenges in a row is not going to be super easy. Uh, but you're kind of in a tough spot right now, and so are other people. This is why I've been saying that some people like Sonya is a good example right here, right? Kind of going with the flow, and she's stuck in a position now where like she doesn't really she's at the mercy of Chris. She can't really do anything.
Yeah.
I don't even think like you said earlier, she didn't even really check in with Cameron, and Cameron didn't check in with her. And I don't know why that didn't happen, if it was just because they felt too rushed with time, or they just were tired and just didn't think about it. They just thought that Chris would tell the other person the same thing. But the reason why that Chris had to give the reason why Sonya votes for Leah is because Adrian was right next to Chris when Sonya asked Chris who to vote for. So he couldn't say Adrian.
Right.
He had to say Leah. It's the only other option. So he says Leah and just sells it really well. And then when Cameron's around, he says Adrian because that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Like voting off your wife makes less sense than voting off Adrian, right? And he
Hmm.
totally told Adrian he's going to tell people to vote for her. So that was his plan the whole time. It just so happened that Adrian was standing there when Sonya asked Chris who to vote for, basically. So then you get this split vote where it's 4 to 2 to 4 to 1 to 1. Sorry,
Yeah.
uh, and if you're Sonya, it's just like at this point you didn't even realize that you were out of train tracks, but you were. You had nowhere else to go.
Yeah. And let me just, I'm not going to be mean to Sonya here, but if you go back and listen to what she said in her exit interview, she
Hmm.
basically, when they ask her, who do you think is going to win? She's like, well, I haven't thought that far. It's like, you're at
Yeah,
final six. How
yeah,
have you not thought that far of like who's going to win the game? And I think
almost
that kind of
there.
shows how she was just playing round to round. She even said, I learned a lot from when I first started in round one to now. And so she was slowly learning the game on the fly. But I
Yeah,
think because she was so like, not, I guess this short-sighted, I guess is the right way to say it, in terms of like playing it round by round instead of thinking long-term alliance. Like, how do I want to build this? Because like early on, she was like, whatever you want, Mason, I'm following you. And then when they had the swap, it was kind of like, okay, we'll get out Siakam and we're Sheboy strong, but it was never like, how can I build the best alliance moving forward? It was always kind of like, where can I kind of fit in the crevices? So I feel like that was part of the reason why she lost and ended up getting like left out of this vote. But also with Chris, he has to know Leah has an idol. So
he knows. No, he 100% knows.
yeah, so it's like if he knows that and she has any inclination that, she's going home, she's gonna play her idol, and now it's gonna maybe blow up in Chris's face. He might be able to survive this round, but like she's got the idol. And I don't know if anybody else knows about Moretta's still a vote at this point or not. We
No
know
one,
from the
no
viewership.
one knows. No
So
one
she
knows.
she still hasn't told anybody, so that doesn't
Not
really play a
anybody.
factor.
Yeah,
But the interesting point is like I just if Chris knows Leah has an idol, and he's like, you know what? Maybe she'll play this for me next round if I'm in trouble. Like we can keep that
maybe.
alliance. Like let's just stay together. Like that could be a smart reason not to. But maybe getting rid of Adrian at this point would have been smarter in his in his gameplay versus anybody else. I know he was using her as the decoy, but that way, if she even hears her name, now she's like, oh, well, Chris told me it's just a decoy, so I'm cool. She said it might come back to bite me, but she's like, I don't think it will. But had Chris got himself, Sonya, and Cameron to do that, and you just tell Moretta, hey, three of us are voting for Adrian. We got to get rid of her. She's too big of a threat. That could have potentially, put Chris in a better spot just because we know that the best class alliance has Adrian and Moretta together. And I think that their age being closer together versus Chris and Leah, the married couple, now you're going to eventually maybe have a 2 versus 2 in a couple episodes here if that's plays out like this. So it's like the alliance inside the alliance. So
Yeah.
that to me is where if you're Chris, you got to think long term. Like I might want to break this up now,
Hmm.
but still keep my wife in the game and keep Moretta on my side and have another option here with Sonya and Cameron, so he could play kind of in the middle once again by Final Five.
Yeah, I think that's the play. I think the reason why is on top of all that you just said, not to reiterate what you just said, but the other thing on top of it is he's been worried the whole time about the girls turning on him. And specifically, I think he means Adrian, Moretta, and Leah. But if he takes out Adrian, then those two girls have nowhere to go really.
Yeah,
Like Leah Leah hasn't worked with Cameron at all, or not really Sonya much either. And but Sonya is much more loyal to Chris anyways. And Cameron hasn't worked with like Moretta in like rounds, several rounds. Like they've kind of worked together here and there, but like we don't see them talking and see them planning together. It's usually like the best class alliance will check in with each other a little bit, and then Chris will go talk to like Sonya and Cameron and that group of people, and like the Sheway people. But Moretta seems to be spending more of her time with the best class group and less with the Sheway group. So if you take out Adrian there, then Leah really only has Moretta and Chris,
mm-hmm.
and Moretta can maybe go back and talk to Cameron and kind of reconnect there a little bit more. But her and Sonya haven't worked together hardly at all. Um, I don't think since like the early because they got separated at the split at the
Mm-hmm.
swap, right? So those first few rounds, the first round they did not work together. They were on opposite sides of the vote of the Anna vote. And then the second vote with Seth, they did work together, but it was only because Mason brought Moretta in at the very last minute. It wasn't
Yep.
like Sonya and Moretta were like, "Hey, we should vote off Seth." It just was kind of a coincidence. Not well, it was Mason that did it. So again, I just think that like that all of a sudden leads to where like if Adrian's gone, I mean, really right now, like think about it. Even right now, who is Sonya's number one ally in the game right now?
Does she have one?
I think she has one. I
You
think
think
it's
it's
Chris.
Chris?
Who's Cameron's number one ally in the game?
Probably Chris.
Chris. Who's Leah's?
Chris.
Who's Adrian's?
I don't know if it's Chris or not, but it seems like it. It seems like
That's
everybody's is Chris. Chris is the connecting point to all of them.
what I'm saying. It's like
Yeah.
he's like just like the puppet master with the strings literally right now. And at some point, we don't know based off of the edit of the episode and the footage that we have how much they're aware of that or not, and how much they're just waiting for their opportunity to take him out. They could have a couple episodes ago, right, when he threw the challenge and let Cameron win.
Yeah.
But at that point, there still were some Siakam players in there, and so I could see why. Like at that point, it was I think it was 4-3 or 4-4 in favor of Shibwe. So I could see if you vote off Chris, then all of a sudden it's like 3-3 Shibwe Siakam, and it could be like a deadlock again. So I can see why you might be hesitant to do that. So we'll see moving forward, but it does seem like that at least 3 or 4 players, their number one ally is Chris,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of power.
It is a lot of power. And if we go back to the scenario of voting off Adrian, right? Like moving forward to the next round, Leah is going to have to play her idol at Final
Yeah,
Five. So if Chris knows that, then he knows Leah is going to be safe no matter what going into Final Four. And if she wins immunity, then she could play it for somebody she wants to. So
yeah,
a lot of different factors here. And then Moretta has a steal vote, which is massive at a Final Five.
yeah, sure.
And
And no one knows
and
about it.
yeah, and nobody knows, right? So like, and that's where this game could have really flipped on its head had Chris tried to like upset the fruit basket a little bit. So I
Yeah.
don't think that he did the wrong move by taking Sonya out. I think it was semi smart. I think it was probably the safest bet. But
Yes. Safest.
also,
Yes.
if you wanted to be a little bit more of a big move kind of person, a little bit
Flashy.
deeper thinking, flashy, Adrian might have been the right vote here, but I think Cameron and Sonny, you have them. I hate to say it like this, but you kind of have them as little pawns to
I mean,
falling
it was. I think that Cameron did that a little bit intentionally at times,
for sure.
and then he kind of got caught up in it and realized I don't know, at this point at least, I would hope after this vote he realizes, oh, things didn't go the way that I wanted them to for the first time in several episodes. And I think in this episode, when it's either this one or the last one, he said, like, I feel like I'm in a groove, I feel like I've gotten a good group, and we've been voting together, and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen this time.
Yeah.
So we'll see how he responds to that. But the point is that, like, you've been leading these people to this point, and a lot of them now are realizing that their options are very limited because they've been tied so much to you, to Chris. So
Mm.
we've kind of already talked about Sonya. Just to kind of wrap up here with thoughts on her game. Overall, I thought she could do well going into it, and she did do pretty well. I was actually surprised by I thought that she maybe was playing it up, how like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I thought she was playing dumb, and not that she was dumb, but I thought she was like playing like she didn't know. But she actually, talking to her in the postseason interview, you'll see she was like, no, I just didn't know what I was doing, and I wanted to learn from people. But the competitive spirit she had and the connections that she was able to make kept her, in early game and mid game from being. She was really safe for a long time. The only chance she really had to get going out was when she got in that swap situation with her and her husband, Neil. But she was really safe most of the time. It just seemed like she did not see past that like merge scenario and was like, okay, let's just get Shibwe. Let's get through, get rid of Siakam and get Shibwe through. But then it was like she didn't think like, okay, well, then what?
Yeah.
Because the answer to that question now is like Chris has all the control and you're gone. Uh, Unfortunately for Sonya.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I kind of said earlier too. Like when she did her exit interview and just said, "Well, I have no idea who's going to win. I'm not sure what's going on." It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that definitely tells, and how the game played out, just because her pulse on things was just not all the way there. So I thought she played a good game, though. I honestly like for how she played. Maybe if somebody else was in the game instead of best class, like she could have aligned,
Yeah.
been in that alliance with Leah and Chris and Loretta. Like
Yeah.
there's a world where she could have easily made that alliance happen. I just
Mhm.
think that it was just an easy vote off here, I think, in terms of like a safe vote. So
Mhm.
it just kind of happened to be like she was more of a challenge threat than Cameron at this point,
For sure.
and that's why she, I think, was the number one target. And of course, I'm still trying to figure out if her name is spelled with a Y or an I.
I honestly like I've seen it both ways so many times. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, Sony A. I like that one better.
Sorry, Sonia,
Sonia.
whatever. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I would love watching her play. I
Yeah,
would love to see what she would do if she wanted to come back and like try to build off of that. But like we said, I think it was like trying to learn on the fly, and then when that happens, you can't really plan forward. So,
yeah,
uh, but I think with that, we're ready to wrap this one up. So let's look forward to episode 11. We've got 2 episodes left. We're almost to the end. Final 5 coming up next week. Look forward to that on Sunday.
drop your predictions of who you think's gonna win in the comments section, everybody.
Who's winning? Like and subscribe, and drop the in the comments.
Prediction.
Who's winning? Yeah, type it out. Prediction. Chris is winning. Moretta's winning. Whoever. Chris. Leah. I don't know.
Cameron, you never know. All right, we'll see y'all next week.